Hello and welcome back to the Movie Soup channel. Today we are looking at the film Official Competition from 2022. I'm not familiar with the behind the scenes of the movie making world, but I have a strong feeling that large part of this film sort of mocks exactly that, and I won't be able to talk much about that and will concentrate on the other aspects and angles of this film. This is, in my opinion, an entertaining bittersweet opposition between the deceiving pop and the highbrow prestigious, which all of us either are part of or experienced at some point in our lives. It is something like the comparison between the analog, the good old, and the easygoing, uncomplicated fit all modern. But what is good or bad about either? How much does this simple generalization leave uncovered? This film does a pretty good job exploring these questions in a wonderful satirical manner. The movie starts with Umberto, a largely successful businessman celebrating, or rather not so much, his 80th birthday. Having achieved great success in business, Umberto now asks himself a question: what do people think of him and what is he going to leave behind? What will be his legacy? He, of course, has the basics covered by donating to charities and having his own foundation, but he wants more. Maybe something like a bridge or a movie. Of course, he won't direct or produce it, but he certainly has enough money to hire some experts and make a great picture in his name. It will be Umberto's legacy, something that will outlive him. This is a curious scene. It is, of course, admirable to see this hugely successful character wanting to help create something, a work of art, something everlasting. At the same time, the motivation is to leave a mark. It is not a desire to tell a story, compose a piece, or otherwise produce something that is of your own creation and thus indicates your ingenuity. No, the idea is to throw money at those who create and have them do it in your name, with as little input from you as possible. Nonetheless, Umberto finds a famous director, Lola, who has the right regalia and of course has a very strong persona. Lives by her own rules, has strong ideas and beliefs, and in general takes no shit from anyone. Lola isn't afraid of risk and doesn't seem to be preoccupied with the consequences of her actions. The free mind is always free. Lola's grand idea is to have two completely different actors star in this great movie in order to create some tangible tension on the screen and support the story that she came up with. Ivan Torres, a prestigious actor and educator as analog as they get. Felix Rivero, a Hollywood star, loud, obnoxious, and easygoing. But Felix is also welcoming, and Ivan is also very highbrow and pretentious. Within the first 1 or 2 minutes of meeting these guys, you see the good and the ugly of both. Behold, the free mind at work, Lola's master copy of the script. I can only assume it is an inside joke. However, I can understand the need to collect the little emotional and memory anchors when developing an idea, a story. Every little bit of the setup counts, especially if you're afraid you won't be able to put yourself back in the exact same state of mind you originally were in. Lola, Ivan, and Felix are getting to know each other, as well as their methods. Ivan is deeply involved with his role. He understands his character, his background, traits, and other aspects that are not present in the script. He is fully immersed. Felix, however, is perfectly comfortable admitting and advocating that a fictional character is just that, a fiction. It doesn't have a backstory or any other information except for what is present in the actual script. There is the plot, there are the lines, there is light, camera, action, and then it's your craft as the actor to act out the lines appropriately. Not more, not less. Lola establishes herself by immediately finding something the two protagonists have in common and opposing herself radically to that. The entire sequence is an ego measuring contest, and Lola shows them who's the boss. But in hindsight, I think this is where the viewer can first notice the glass-like fragile ego of Felix, the over-the-board pretentiousness and sense of invincibility of Ivan, and Lola's lack of realization what kind of trap she sprung for herself. First, script reading. Working with a genius mind isn't always easy. Try to convey a paragraph's worth of sense in just buenas noches. A good challenge for the master of technicalities, that is, Ivan, of course. Felix isn't having much of a problem, either demonstrating a 6.5 out of 10 drunk state, at least according to Lola, and that's all that matters. Both seem to be somewhat at a loss, not completely following Lola, and maybe it would have been something that would help them connect, if only for their egos. Felix does some combat training, and of course he does it in pure cliché Hollywood style, a trainer as fake as the technique, and the sole focus is on cool moves and tricks with little to no heed paid to the adequacy of response nor the consideration of consequences of the flashy moves. Ivan, as was mentioned earlier, teaches. He's one of those lovely professors whose sole goal seems to be the destruction of your dreams and making the subject you chose to study lose all that made you excited about it in the first place. He slams you down to the ground. He expects always something extremely specific from you that fits his own worldview and narrative, and there is nothing, absolutely nothing that you can think of or know that he will deem worthy, as he knows best, always. At the next reading session, Felix starts to stick it up to Ivan, who in turn sort of squishes his ego a little to show them his artistic performance capabilities. Of course, he puts a little too much emphasis on the physical part, which results in Felix receiving a horrendous face wound. Lola gives him a weirdly sexual quick checkup, and then they proceed as if nothing happened. I think at this stage, Lola sort of lost the grasp of the situation, and the two protagonists are now in full Cold War mode, and knives behind the backs and all that. And at the same time, either is willing to quote-unquote lower himself to the other's level if it means domination. Lola raises the pressure by having the two read out an intense scene under a 5-ton hanging rock, which turns out to be fake. This is in a way a metaphor for the entire movie. The pressure you put yourself under is quite often imaginary, and the weight of it is self-imposed. And though the exercise is a success, telling them the rock was fake sort of undermined the purpose in my opinion. At least from the control point of view. Yes, Lola would have wanted them to know they don't need a rock to act the way she wants them to, but having them realize their lives are in her hands would reassert some sense of control in this mess. Next, we see a little kissing rehearsal as another wonderful sarcastic representation of what I assume is the marketization of real emotion and art. Or maybe the entire session was there simply to let Lola make out with another actress and make everyone else feel uncomfortable. For reasons I cannot understand, Lola wants the two now get on the same page and attempts to achieve that via an exercise, where she wraps both Ivan and Felix in a saran wrap and shreds their trophies. A very art house-like style scene, but quite frankly, I don't buy it. If you despise the acknowledgement and regalia, then why accept them in the first place? All three of them are exactly the same in that way. It's just Lola thinks she's above it by shredding the trophies. Ivan is second best by swiftly accepting the new idea, and Felix is of course ignorant. But not so ignorant as to not realize they think they are more sophisticated than him. So Felix comes up with an elaborate lie and shamelessly plays both of them. I think by this stage the viewer fully sees that none of the characters are good or bad, black or white. Everyone is both, even their traits, actions, and intentions are both good and bad, depending on the angle. It's funny how Ivan's ego is shown to be big enough to have him pitch the dual role to Lola. Something that Felix will end up doing. Felix admits his bluff, or a show of skill as he put it. Ivan responds with a bravado of his own, and Lola gives up on her desperate attempts to control the situation. We see her at home trying to dance a couple of times. I didn't quite understand the point of the scenes at first, but after some thinking, I think the intention here is to show her struggle with real emotions, social interactions, and the overall freedom of mind sort of thing. She is driven and creative to the point of absolute obsession, but she lives inside her head. She rejects the social norms and proudly stands apart from what she believes others consider as normal. However, this very ignorance led her to believe she would be able to orchestrate and contain a real social confrontation, and she badly underestimated the consequences of playing with artists' egos. A hilarious scene of Ivan and his wife listening to some avant-garde music, which can barely be called music in my opinion, but rather a cacophony of sounds, a point where the music stops being enjoyed for the sake of musicality, and the obsession with technicalities and meaning takes over. The funniest thing is that his wife finds the sound of a drum particularly captivating and tribal. A drum that turns out to be their neighbor's banging. Lola decides to have some fun and has the two warm up before the last rehearsal by insulting each other in the face. The situation does seem to be getting under Felix's skin, this time for real. And right after we see that, Ivan seems to be quite unhappy, having been sidetracked in the last scene by being disposed of and replaced by Felix's character. So at the stage of production where Lola would have hoped to have her protagonists fully figured out, refined, aligned with each other, she instead has two very antagonized and wounded egos. A sort of a situation that needs only the tiniest of sparks to explode. And the spark comes at a little internal event before the shooting begins, where Lola is forced to give a speech, showing her having lost all faith in this not yet even made film. Ivan's pretentiousness, supported by a proper amount of liquor, finally shows jealousy that is too much even for his wife. He rants about Felix to Umberto's assistant while ignoring all the comments and remarks. In my opinion, it's a nice little showing that whatever Ivan thinks of Felix, he is very much looking in the mirror in that regard. Anyway, the assistant gets replaced by Felix, who mechanically throws Ivan off the roof. The flashy moves came in handy after all. Felix panics. He doesn't know what to do, what to say, and he realizes that it's all in his hands and he can choose. And he chooses what Ivan would have chosen. As a matter of fact, he chooses what Ivan chose already. He plays the dual role. The movie opens and the crew has a press conference. The last joke of this movie. The questions are great, and Lola responds to all of them in a spectacular fashion, while Felix, of course, plays out his homage to Ivan, who, as Felix points it out several times, is in a vegetative state from which the doctor said he cannot return. Umberto, in turn, opens his bridge, and Ivan wakes up from coma. The end. Or at least it should have been the end. Instead, the director shows us Felix on another movie set, being himself essentially, and Lola staring at the camera, laughing and musing about the movie endings. So to round this movie up, I think it's quite insightful, funny and sarcastic. I will go on a limb and make a bet that you'll enjoy it even more if you're privy to the behind the scenes of movie making. What I did not like about this film is that it subjects itself to the same highbrow stereotypical presumptuousness as one of its protagonists. It could have expressed itself somewhat more pragmatically and clearer in some scenes, and that would not have hurt it. And the ending was screwed up. Seems like the director ran out of ideas and resorted to a little tangent. Nevertheless, I highly recommend you go give it a watch. You will have a good laugh and will most certainly have some thoughts to share about it with your friends after. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then leave a like, and if you really did, consider posting a comment and subscribing. But for now, a goodbye.